This is a special report from ABC News Digital.
Hello, I'm Ty Hernandez in New York, and this is an ABC News Digital special report. British Prime Minister David Cameron took center stage in London's House of Commons, urging support for military intervention in Syria, hearing questions, some cheers, and a few boos.
To do so, that is what today's motion is about, and I commend it to the House.
Calm and patience are required.
More from Iraq this afternoon at Parliament in a moment. But first, we're joined by ABC's Taman Bradley with the latest on Syria from Washington. Taman?
Hi, Ty. President Obama is meeting with his national security team today behind closed doors before briefing members of Congress tonight about his decision on Syria. All the president will say right now is that if he orders a strike, it would be limited. As President Obama weighs a possible attack on Syria, his administration is scheduled to brief members of Congress by phone today on the situation. It's also expected that the administration will seek to build public support for action, releasing in the next day or so a comprehensive intelligence report justifying military action against the Syrian regime in response to an alleged chemical attack it launched against civilians. The president told the PBS NewsHour he wants to send Bashar al-Assad a strong but measured message.
I have no interest in any kind of open-ended conflict in Syria, but we do have to make sure that when countries break international norms, that they are held accountable.
UN chemical weapons inspectors in Syria headed out for another day of investigations. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon wants the United States and its allies to wait for the inspectors' report before a military strike.
They will come out of Syria by Saturday morning.
And there are reports out of Syria that military installations and government buildings have evacuated in the capital as the country prepares for a possible attack. Ty?
And Taman, today brings more legal questions. Has President Obama put forward his justification for a possible attack in Syria?
What's really interesting, you saw that vote going on today in the Parliament. What the president is saying is that he is sure, the administration is positive that those chemical weapons were used by the Syrian regime on civilians. And the president is arguing that those chemical weapons pose a threat to U.S. national security. That was the same basis that the Bush administration made, argument that the Bush administration made back in 2003 before the invasion of Iraq.
Now, Taman, what's the latest from the administration on the president's decision-making process? We know that the U.S. has possibly urged the investigators to come back home, perhaps paving the way for an airstrike.
Yeah, it does seem that President Obama is not waiting for those UN investigators. All we know right now is that the White House is saying that the president has not made his decision, but it looks like the president will decide whatever he's going to decide without waiting for the UN, although U.S. allies do want the president to hold off and wait.
And what about Congress? The members of Congress have been pushing pretty hard for the White House to more formally present its case. Will they get what they want?
Well, some of them are probably not going to be satisfied at all with the case that the administration makes. Now, the president today is going to brief them. There will be classified briefing and there will be unclassified information that goes out there. But some people want the president to get congressional authorization for any type of military attack. But of course, that is unlikely. Congress is not even in session right now. Some members want Congress to come back to get that authorization.
All right. ABC's Taman Bradley in Washington. Thank you for joining us. Now we go now to London, where ABC's Nick Schifrin's been monitoring the debate both inside the Parliament and across the UK. Good afternoon, Nick.
Hi, Ty. How are you?
All right, good. So we've seen some passionate exchanges today in the halls of British power. If the U.S. decided to strike, say today, where do we know or where do we think the Cameron government stands?
It's very simple. If the U.S. strikes today or tomorrow or frankly even over the weekend, the U.S. is alone. There is no support, official support from this government as of now. They're debating now in the Houses of Parliament. The Prime Minister here, because it's a parliamentary system, had to go to Parliament, had to get approval from hundreds of parliamentary members for this attack. At first he said, let's go forward with a single vote authorizing the attack. He realized that that would fail. Therefore, he stepped back and said, all right, let's do a single resolution at first that will say one day or soon enough we may need to attack. And it's conditional. And even that vote is not clear that he may win that. So in the UK right now, there's a long debate. There's going to be a vote in a few hours. It's not clear the United Kingdom is going to back even the thought of attacking. So as of now, the U.S. is alone, and frankly, even over the weekend or early next week, if this first resolution passes the UK Parliament and that second resolution comes up for a vote, this government may not support it.
You know, immediately following this attack, the British government made some of the strongest comments in terms of the attack and the presumption of a chemical attack. Why the hesitation now?
One word, like we've talked about for the last few weeks, for the last few days rather, and like Taman has mentioned, Iraq. The Labour Party here, which supported the Iraq war, whose leader went to war in Iraq, standing next to President Bush, is saying, hold on, wait a minute. We've seen this movie and we don't trust the intelligence. We've seen this movie and we know how it ends. And right now, that Labour Party, which has a significant portion of the opposition, is stopping this resolution, is stopping approval of a military strike. And with other people within David Cameron's own party, the Conservative Party, there's one report that says as many as 70 members of his own party are questioning this. There's a lot of people saying, look, we've been here before 10 years ago in Iraq. We don't want to repeat.
Let's listen to both sides of the argument now directly from the speakers. First, Prime Minister Cameron earlier today laying out the rationale for intervention.
In no way does the opposition motion even begin to point the finger of blame at President Assad. Now, that is at odds with what has been said by NATO, President Obama, and every European and regional leader I've spoken to. There is an enormous amount of open source reporting. There is an enormous amount of videos we can see. There's the fact we know that the regime has an enormous arsenal. The fact they've used it before. The fact they were attacking that area. And then with the opposition, of course, there's the fact they don't have those weapons, they don't have those delivery systems, and the attack took place in an area which they were themselves holding.
A very animated call for action there. Now let's listen to the opposition leader, Ed Miliband, who took the floor, and the Labour Party's case for caution.
I think we need to gather further evidence over the coming days. That is part of persuading the international community and people in this country of President Assad's culpability, and I think that's important.
Any reckless or irresponsible action could lead to full war in that area, and we have to understand from previous conflicts that war is not some sort of hokey-cokey concept. Once you're in, you're in.
For this House, it is surely a basic point. Evidence should precede decision, not decision precede evidence.
So, Nick, the call there for more intelligence, we know that the UN inspectors there may have a report within days, or it may take them longer, but no matter what they conclude, they are not looking at who did this. They're just looking at whether it happened. Would that be enough to satisfy the Labour Party?
No, I don't think it will be, which is why the British government took a rather unusual step of putting out its intelligence report earlier today. And part of it reads that the regime has used chemical weapons on a smaller scale on at least 14 occasions in the past, and that's a number we actually hadn't heard before. And this intelligence report concludes there is some intelligence to suggest regime culpability in this attack last week. These factors make it, quote, highly likely the Syrian regime was responsible. That's the British government's best case for war, and that, in addition to the fact that we don't have UN evidence yet, means that all of these opposition, hundreds of opposition lawmakers in Parliament right now are opposing this, and David Cameron might lose this vote tonight. Now, you heard the Labour head there, David Miliband, speak about how they needed to wait for the UN. We may get a little movement on that thanks to Saturday morning. The UN inspectors may leave. The UN will put out some kind of statement or some kind of assessment, presumably over the weekend, but even that is challenging the White House's schedule. At the earliest, we're talking about a second vote in the UK Parliament over the weekend, maybe early next week, and the White House seemed to have been beating the drum toward war coming a strike, today, tomorrow, or at the latest over the weekend.
Okay, so let's now turn and look at the French. They played a larger role in the military campaign in Libya. Where do they stand on Syria right now?
Well, I think the French are having some of the same problems that the Brits are. There's a debate as to whether you can go ahead with this strike before the UN finishes its work. And we're not talking about a week here. We're not talking about even that many days. We're talking about 36 hours before the UN inspectors will hand a report to the Secretary General in which they will presumably say that we have evidence of chemical weapons. But as you pointed out, they will not say that the regime launched it. So in some ways, it almost doesn't matter what the UN says, and that's what the White House is arguing, that it doesn't matter what the Security Council says, because there's a justification of war without the Security Council. It doesn't matter what the UN weapons inspectors, because they don't have a large enough mandate. Let's get on with it. And the British and the French are both saying, wait a minute, let's at least give the UN a chance. And that means that if the U.S. wants to go ahead in the next couple days, it's doing it alone.
Yeah. How badly does the president want the support of these Western allies?
Well, I think the only people who can answer that are sitting in the White House right now. But he has said very publicly that he doesn't want to do this alone, and that he wants the support of his allies, and he expects the support of his allies. And also, it's interesting to talk about Libya in this example. We're talking a lot about Iraq, but with Libya, the president worked very hard to get the support not only of the British and French, who frankly led militarily the campaign, and that was a real stretch for them militarily, but he also had the support of the Arab League. He had the support of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and Qatar itself actually sent fighter jets over to Libya to help this campaign. Right now, he had some Arab League discussion yesterday about how the Assad regime was culpable in the attack, but the Arab League did not endorse any kind of military action. The British are now stepping very far from endorsing military action, and there's no explicit endorsement from the French president yet of military action. So right now, the president is much more isolated than he has said he always wanted to be, not only for this attack, but in the past with Libya as well.
And the debate continues overseas. ABC's Nick Schifrin in London, thank you for joining us. And we're going to have more on the Syrian crisis as the day unfolds. More on abcnews.com as well. I'm Ty Hernandez in New York, and this has been an ABC News Digital Special Report.
This has been a special report from ABC News Digital.